Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I know that some people will be joining. It's going to take a minute or two for everyone to join, but I do want to get started because I have a lot to cover and I don't want to lose time. And hopefully, we'll have time for a few questions at the end. But my name is Mimi Boblik. I'm with Parents Against Vaping. I'm a founding partner. I've been involved since 2018 and share a little bit about my story. I have three kids who are now in their 20s, but when one of my uh, daughters was 17, she started vaping in 2018. And when you see some of the marketing that I'm going to share, you'll see why it was so alluring to our kids. And this started me down a journey of feeling pretty frustrated and angry at the industry and also wanting to understand more. And the more I understood, the more angry I became and also wanted to share the knowledge that I've learned with other people. So that's what Parents Against Vaping is doing. And that's why we're here today. So I am joined by two of my colleagues, Austin and Alyssa. They are sort of playing Wizard of Oz in the back, but I do want to thank them for all their work. Alyssa will try to answer questions in the Q&A function. We do have a lot of people joining today, so she'll get to as many as she can, as well as Austin. And so you can go ahead and put some questions in the Q&A function. We'll try and get to as many as possible. So some of you are parents, some of you are public health people, some may have kids who are vaping, and others may not, may not have started vaping, which is great. Our information, I'm a parent, I'm not a doctor, but our information is all based on the latest science and research from our public health experts. We have pulmonologists, psychiatrists, addiction specialists who help us curate, the latest cessation, expert opinions and other advice. So what is really important today to understand is that our goal is to protect youth from vaping and nicotine use. We're not talking about adults who vape. So that is really critical to understand. And those of you who are hearing this for the first time, I hope that you find it useful. Some of you this may be not the first time you're hearing it. We have updated some information. We're going to continue to refresh information as we get it. And we do have some new findings to share today based on some new surveys that have been done. So thank you for joining. And I do want to ask you if you could fill out a quick survey while we are talking. This is just to understand where we are, who we are and where we are, and how much people understand about vaping, how much knowledge there is. And we hope that this will be useful to you. Just want to understand what's happening. So in terms of what we hope to get out of this, it's a long presentation. I'm going to go through a lot of things very quickly, but importantly, really understanding how we got here, how the industry has targeted our kids, and what what the latest devices look like. Explain some of the dangers of vaping, and I'll just share our learning objectives. Explain the dangers of vaping, and also not just vaping nicotine, but vaping other products, and also not just using vapes to take nicotine and THC and other products, but also there's non-nicotine vapes. There are non-vaping products that we want you to be aware of because they are taking over our kids' lives. And also knowing how to protect our youth, some of the ways to talk to youth, and some cessation advice that we've been given, and frankly, how to take action in your own community. If you are feeling as frustrated as we have been, there are ways to take action in our community. So I just want to talk a little bit quickly about who we are. Parents Against Vaping, we're a national organization. We are the only national parent voice in this conversation. Our founders would say when we started this conversation, we were hoping to join Mothers Against Drunk Driving or something like that for this issue, but none existed. So we started one, and the three founders started it in 2018. I joined them shortly after, when I found out my own daughter was vaping. And basically, if you haven't heard the origin story, I'll just quickly mention what happened was in 2018, a Juul representative entered their 9th grade son's classroom and, under the guise of an anti-addiction talk, told the kids that Juul was totally safe. As we know, it is definitely not totally safe. Juul is one of the products you may have heard about that sort of led the epidemic. Now our kids are using many other products that are on the market, and I'll share some of those with you. And since then, we started as a very small group of angry, committed moms, and we've quickly grown into a national force. And we are helping to get laws passed across the country on the federal, state, and local level. And, with all of our incredible partners across the country that have been fighting this fight for many decades. So we have also been in the news, beating the drum about the dangers of vaping and the impacts on our kids, which really has been life-changing for many families, unfortunately. But we have been featured in a documentary on Netflix and other places. So it's been very gratifying, but we still have a lot of work to do, and we know that. The good news is there are new statistics that just came out. There's a national survey that comes out once a year, and it's done at the beginning of the year. So sometimes by the time we get the results, things might have changed. But the really good news is that the statistics are showing that vaping rates are coming down. The height of the vaping epidemic, there were 28% of youth vaping. That's an incredibly high number. That was about 5.3 million kids in 2019. So the numbers have come down. This year, they're showing in 2024 that about 1.6 million teens, that's middle and high school kids, are vaping, which is down from last year, which was about 2.1 million kids. So it is coming down. I think all the work that you all are doing and that we're all doing is helping, but we do need to stay vigilant. And I think one of the things that is still poignant is, first of all, that most kids who start vaping are using flavored devices, using flavors. Flavors are hooking kids. And that's why we fight so hard to just get flavors off the market. That's really our biggest fight in terms of legislatively. We want to get flavors off the market. But also, very importantly, is that we still are showing that of those youth who are vaping, many of them are using daily and frequently, which is showing that there is a high level of addiction among those who are using e-cigarettes. And this survey doesn't capture young adults, but what we know is, unfortunately, that over 10% of young adults, that's over 18 to 24, are using e-cigarettes. And what I think is happening, and what we all believe is happening, is that they start in middle and high school, they're addicted, they bring that addiction to college and beyond, and then they are hooked. So it's really very hard to quit, and we'll talk about that. But it is really important to know that these young adults, unfortunately, are still using at a high rate. And the most common device, and I'll share some pictures with you, are disposables. They're just really easy to hide. They're really easy to dispose of. Unfortunately, they're really not disposable. They're terrible for the environment, but they're easy to conceal from parents. You don't need to hide them in your backpack. You just use them and throw them away. So this is, and also they come in incredibly, tempting flavors. So for our kids, this is very enticing. And I want to show you this, not because, these are not current numbers. 2019 is a few years ago, but only to show that really we shouldn't have ever gotten here. Vaping rates, or smoking rates, were really high in the 90s, almost 28%. But by 2019, they were under 6% among youth. And unfortunately, with the advent of e-cigarettes, the rates of nicotine use through e-cigarettes now just shot up to the 1990 numbers. So unfortunately, e-cigarettes really reversed a lot of the hard work that parents and public health experts did over the last number of decades, just reversing all that tremendous progress. But again, we are working hard, and those rates are coming down. COVID. Oh, sorry. whoops, I wanted to share a video with
even
you.
before COVID.
I want to pause. Of a fantastic public health expert. I'm not very good at this, hold on. But his name is Dr. Avery, and he's a fantastic addiction psychiatrist. He's been really a great partner of ours. We have an Ask the Expert conversation with him if you want to look on our website. He talks about addiction and talks about the use of not only e-cigarettes, but other substances as well. And I just want to share his words. He does, mention COVID a bit because this was recorded maybe a year or two ago, but it really is relevant today, talking about addiction and how prevalent these products are.
COVID, we were seeing the youth struggling. I mean, the data on persistent sadness and hopelessness and self-harm, they were up even before COVID. And then you had COVID and stress related to race and the wars and the screens and everything else. It's not surprising that we saw, and we do see in our clinical practice, more and more adolescents using substances. I think one thing that I'll add to that great introduction is that this stress is on our kids, but it's also really on our parents. And, there was a real notable study that came out about 2 months ago about how adults between age 35 to 50 drinking more, binging more, using more marijuana, more hallucinogens than ever before. And so this stress is, of course, stressing our kids, but partly because it's stressing their parents. 35 to 50, these are the age of the parents of the adolescents. And so they're using more substances. They're stressed by all the same stressors that are impacting the kids. And so where do kids turn? You can't turn to mom and dad sometimes. We saw in COVID increase the violence at home, increased violence in communities. You don't feel safe at school. You end up at home on your screen and turning to something that can provide some relief. And we're certainly highlighting nicotine in this space, but also marijuana and other substances. And when you feel like there aren't outlets, when you feel trapped, when you feel sad and alone and anxious, it's not surprising that you use these devices to get relief. And then the terrible thing that happens is that they 100% help at first. That's why everyone does drugs. They help at first. Weeks and months in, they're making everything worse. And now you have an additional problem to untangle. You're stuck in an addiction that often pushes you more into the secrets and isolates you more and more from your community and from help.
So, I just find his words really powerful. And I do mean to say, there is a question about whether or not this is being recorded. It is being recorded. You may have seen that come up when you signed in, but for those of you who couldn't get on or who are having trouble with this or need to get off early or whatever, it will be recorded. You will be sent, as long as you registered, you will be sent a recording. So you can rest assured. So anyway, I think his words are really powerful about the pressures that our kids are under and what he's seeing in his own practice. And so, I just want to share a little bit about how we got here. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but if you look at these pictures, this industry said that, especially Juul, because really Juul came out first, said that they were trying to solve a problem of adult smokers, trying to help adult smokers get off of cigarettes and switch to e-cigarettes. But obviously these ads tell a very different story. And what do these companies know? These companies know that 90% of people who struggle with addiction start with substances before the age of 18. So they know that if they could get our kids hooked young, they're far more likely to have them as lifelong customers. So, this is what I think our kids are seeing. They're seeing it on Instagram. They're seeing it in places where we don't see. Why? Because they know these companies are targeting our kids. They're going after them, not us. So I just think it's really important for us parents to also to understand what they're seeing. And these are just pictures of other people doing the work for them now. These are Instagrammers. They may be influencers, or they may be just common, young adults posting things that make it look so alluring and so cool, right? So, I think that we need to also have some compassion with our own kids, because our kids have been lured into this, right? To think this is harmless and it's cool. And so I just wanted to show this to help understand, a lot of companies are paying influencers to push these products. And so we just need to be aware of all of that. And also talking about being, you know, alluring to our kids, the stores are also really going after our kids. And there may be stores who are doing the right thing, but if you go into bodegas or you know, convenience stores, gas stations, any of these places, these products are right in our kids' faces. They're at eye level. Usually they can often next to candies, they look like candy. People just make them seem very harmless. So they're basically being sold where our kids shop. And this is not an accident. So, you know, this also just shows that we need better enforcement, right? And we also know that they're targeting, you know, underserved communities, in places where our kids are, near schools. I live in New York City, and I can tell you, they are not following the laws. There are vape shops everywhere near schools, which is definitely not legal. And the tobacco industry has had a long history of strategic and aggressive marketing to specific populations, you know, LGBTQ populations, veterans, low-income neighborhoods, really going after the American Indian. I mean, the amount of, you can see some of these ads, they are really directed at specific populations. They have used tactics like sponsoring events like gay pride events. They use giveaways. They hand out free products at events. They're trying to become friends of different communities. And you know, they, under the guise of corporate social responsibility, they make it look like these companies care deeply about you, but they're really just trying to get you hooked as a new customer. So nowhere is this more egregious than tobacco's targeting of Black communities over decades. This is nothing new. And you can see in these ads, I mean, they're really alluring, and they have gone after Black communities for decades. And now it worked. You know, they pushed menthol in the Black communities, and now 80% of Black smokers use menthol. So marketing does work, and it's very upsetting to see, but it does happen. And just very briefly, you know, the FDA, the federal level, people in power are not really doing enough to help this issue. There are only 4 flavored products on the market that have been approved, and yet thousands of flavored products remain on the market. I mean, if you go to any of these vape shops or any of these shops, you'll see most of the things you see are not FDA approved yet. So really, they shouldn't be on the market. And how did they get here? Well, and this is not China's fault, but China has actually banned flavored products, flavored vapes, because they're dangerous to Chinese children. However, we continue to allow these products through from China. About 90% of these products come from China. Again, it's American companies ordering them, but most importantly, also our enforcement agencies are not stopping them at the border. So our country is just being flooded with millions and millions of products that are mostly illegal. So we also need to do a better job of enforcement at the border. So I wanted to show some of the most popular flavors right now. It is a game of whack-a-mole. These may not be the most popular in a few months, but right now I'm showing you what currently is there in case you see these in your kids' backpacks or, you know, in their pockets or in their bedrooms. Most of these products, you know, again, are not on the market legally because the flavors are not legal. But these disposable products are really alluring to kids, again, not only because they're super easy to hide, but they're cheaper than cigarettes, they're cheaper than non-disposable e-cigarettes, and they have a lot of nicotine. So each one of these devices has about at least 1 to 2 packs of cigarettes worth of nicotine. It's a lot of nicotine, and many are even jacked up more now. So the average disposable vape has about 600, 800 puffs, but some contain as many as 5,000 puffs. So it's a lot. Could be as much as a full carton of cigarettes worth of nicotine. The problem with these for kids, among other problems, is that there's no calibration. You don't know how much you've done until the device is empty. And then you've taken in a lot of nicotine. So these are really easy to hide, and they're really enticing to kids. These are also products kids are using. They're pod-based devices. So some of them you need to have a separate pod that clicks into the device that you don't then throw away. You only throw away the empty pod. And the refillable devices, while they're harder to use, these are devices where you buy the device and then you buy the e-liquid and you pour the e-liquid into the device. Now, what's enticing about this is that there's about 15,000 kid-friendly flavors: gummy bear, cotton candy, Kool-Aid, Hawaiian punch, so kids can really have a field day with putting in what they want into these devices. Unfortunately, also, these devices can be used with THC liquid. THC is weed, pot, we'll call it, there's a lot of different terms for it, but it's the psychoactive property in marijuana. So they can be used interchangeably often, and that is not great for our kids as well. These are crazy. So these are some of the new ones that we've seen. These are inhalers they're vapes made to look like inhalers, highlighters. Some even look like games, and they even have a gaming device inside where the more puffs you take, you win points. So it's really disturbing to see some of these products out there. And if you try to tell me that these are targeted adults, there's just no way you're going to pull that over any parent. So these are really important to be aware of. We sounded the alarm about these years ago because we started to see more and more of our kids using these products. These are nicotine pouches and gums. The pouches are little pouches that you put in between your teeth and your gum. It dissolves the nicotine into the blood system. These are highly addictive, and they also contain many of the flavoring chemicals that are in e-cigarettes. So it's just really important to be aware of. Zyn is a really popular one, but there are other ones out there that are on the market. And frankly, they just contain so much nicotine, and nicotine is really bad for developing brain. And I'll explain that in a bit. But nicotine remains, it's bad for the cardiovascular system. So yes, these are not bad for your lungs because you're not inhaling anything. But remember, nicotine is one of the most addictive chemicals on the planet. So this is just another way to hook kids. And I think that kids probably perceive this as harmless because you're not vaping it, maybe because you're not hurting your lungs. But currently we have about 480,000 students using Zyn and other products like this. And we're hearing from school administrators and teachers and others that they're starting to see more and more of it in schools. And my own kids are telling me that kids are using them more. So just to be aware of these. Another product to be aware of is this whole category of non-nicotine vapes. So these are vapes that basically contain all the other chemicals that are in nicotine vapes without the nicotine. So they tend to be marketed as promoting wellness, which in fact is very ironic because they are anything but keeping you well. Anything you inhale into the lungs is not good for you. But these products contain, again, most of the same chemicals that are used, the unhealthy flavoring chemicals and other chemicals used in e-cigarettes. So it's just really important to know that these products are not okay for our youth. It's not a free pass. It's just not a toy. They do contain a lot of the same chemicals. Also, these are not regulated the way that e-cigarettes are because e-cigarettes have nicotine. So they're basically sold to our youth. There's no age verification. There's no age restriction. Anyone can buy these. And, they're promoting it as, help you, inhale your vape your melatonin so you can sleep, or vape your vitamin B so you get your vitamins. But really, these are claims that they cannot substantiate. There's been no FDA approval, nothing like that in these. It's very hard to actually take in the positive properties through the lungs. it's just hurting the lungs. And so we just need to make our kids aware that these products are not harmless. Also, it feels like much of these are like a starter kit for our kids. I mean, look at how they're marketed. Their market is super cool and alluring. And while they don't contain nicotine, they feel like a starter kit for our kids to start vaping. And once they get used to the habit of vaping, they can, vape anything really. And while we are not cannabis or THC, pot, weed, whatever you want to call it, experts, we more and more parents are asking us to address it. And so we know that it's an issue. We're hearing it more and more. I think as states start to offer recreational marijuana and legalize recreational marijuana, it does have a perception among our kids that these products are safe to use, and they are not. Cannabis, we like to call it weed. We think cannabis is just a way of the industry calling it sort of more scientific something, but really it's pot. While nicotine is still the most commonly used substance in vapes, more and more people are starting to vape marijuana through these vaping devices. So kids, I think, perceive a low risk of marijuana, and they may think that vaping is a safer way to use it. These are all speculations that we're hearing from the field, but it is concerning because a lot of kids are using, it's like a chasing behavior. So you have the nicotine has this sort of the nicotine makes the anti-anxiety and anti-pain perception of cannabis more intense. And so you have this, like, the nicotine may make them feel more anxious, but the cannabis may calm them down. So they have this sort of chasing behavior. They use one and then the other back and forth, is what we're hearing. And so we just want to make you aware that, again, not a free pass for our kids. We're finding more and more that kids are using these products. There are definite risks of these products and perceived benefits. These are not real benefits, but perceived by youth. It can definitely decrease academic performance and other issues, including serious mental health issues, mental illness. And on the general day-to-day, it can make people lack motivation. I think some of the benefits that we hear from youth is that it feels good. As Dr. Avery said, it helps with stress and anxiety in the short term, but once the addiction takes over, it can make you more stressed and more anxious. And just to see some of we know some of these effects, we know some of the symptoms, but just as parents, so we can look out for things. So THC, which is, it's the main ingredient in marijuana, in cannabis, that causes the high, right? So we know that there's, unfortunately, we're hearing that there's a link between cannabis use and an increased risk of mental health disorders like schizophrenia, depression, and anxiety, especially among youth who are genetically predisposed. So we just really want to make our kids aware and parents aware that of the dangers. So people, often ask us, what's worse, cigarettes or vaping? And unfortunately for youth, none of these are great alternatives, but I do want to explain a little bit about the differences. So with a vape, you have a special technology of nicotine called nicotine salts, which are designed to hit the bloodstream really quickly, give you this nice alluring high, this rush that kids talk about. And it is what is causing the addiction. That is sort of your dopamine rush. The nicotine from tobacco, you still get that rush, but you're burning tobacco leaves. It's also, if you look at a carton, you can see how much you've smoked. With a vape, there is no calibration. You have no idea how much you've used until it's gone. And then if you use a whole vape, as we mentioned, you could have used at least a pack to two worth of, of nicotine worth of, it's a lot of nicotine in the vapes. Also, cigarettes, you have to go outside. It smells. You're really not allowed to use them in most places around the country or the world now. And you can tell when someone's been smoking. It's on their hair and on their clothes. You can really tell. with vaping, unfortunately, kids can use them anywhere. They use them in the classroom sometimes when the teachers turn their backs. They are designed for discretion. Kids throw them away when they're done using them. We know that kids use them day and night. Some unfortunately keep them under their pillow because they have such an addiction that they need to keep them, you know, close by. So it's just really, it's hard, you know, they're both really bad. They both cause damage to the body. The vaping devices are unfortunately really alluring to our kids now because of how easy they are to use day and night. So just want to share, you know, sometimes we would ask kids what is in a vape. And in fact, when I asked my own daughter, when I started to learn more and more, she said, Mom, it's fine. It's just flavored water. And of course, the more research I did, there's 0% water in vapes. What there are all these chemicals in vapes. Now, different vapes have different chemicals, but basically, there are many toxic chemicals and carcinogens in vapes. There is no water. So many of the flavoring chemicals are used as food additives, but they have never been tested and determined safe to, you know, not to eat, but rather to mix with other chemicals, burn it at high levels, and then inhale into the lungs. That has not been proven safe. And in fact, we know from our pulmonologists that this is causing irritation of the lungs and sometimes worse. So it's just really important to know, you know, what's in these products. And even if you take out all these chemicals and just leave the nicotine, our research experts have told us that that even just the aerosol that's associated with increased risk of cancer in the lungs and bladders of mice, just the nicotine alone. So it's going to be years till we understand the full health harms of e-cigarettes, just like it took years with cigarettes. But we know enough to know that these products are harmful to our kids. So what are some of the real health harms? I think one of the most, I mean, they're all important. I think for me, one of the most disturbing is the damage to the brain, because unfortunately, the brain, some of the damage is permanent. Unfortunately, as a parent, you know, this is the most important part of any of this presentation, but you know, as many of us know, the brain continues to develop until around 25, sometimes even longer. Developing brains are really sensitive to drugs, including nicotine and really any addictive substances. They're just more prone to addiction, again, which is why, as I mentioned earlier, 90% of you know, people who struggle with addiction started before the age of 18. So this is when the brain is most susceptible. Unfortunately, what happens when people vape nicotine is that, I mentioned, they get a nice alluring head rush, they get this dopamine rush. Dopamine is a chemical that is naturally created in our brains. When something good happens, we release dopamine. If someone scores a goal in a soccer game or in a video game, or unfortunately, when you're on your phone a lot and the kids, they see something really funny, or those are dopamine hits. When kids vape, they get a hit of dopamine over and over again. When they start with enough of this, the dopamine becomes hard to release on its own. So you need more and more nicotine just to feel normal. And this is the start of the addiction, right? So unfortunately, we do know that kids are vaping sometimes to deal with underlying stress, underlying mental health issues, anxiety, depression. And again, as Dr. Avery mentioned, it does make it feel better at first, but then it can worsen, it can often worsen anxiety, worsen depression. And we also know that nicotine causes, again, permanent cognitive changes, including worsening memory, worsening processing speed, and impulse control issues. So there's nothing good there. In terms of the lungs, our pulmonologist experts are really unhappy with what they're seeing in their practices now among youth. These products contain chemicals, but also heavy metals and ultrafine particles that get inhaled and lodged into the lungs that can cause irritation, inflammation. Sometimes it can cause asthma or worsen asthma. And in terms of the heart, because nicotine's a stimulant, It can get the heart going, cause irregular heartbeats. My daughter, when she was really vaping at her height, would complain about her heart palpitating and racing. And I would say, well, are you vaping? And she said, yes. And I said, well, I think that's what's causing your problems with your heart, is that you're feeling anxious because your heart is racing from the nicotine. So we know enough to know, again, these are not good for the heart. Also, the flavoring chemicals are toxic to heart cells, and they're doing a lot of research on all of these issues now. And then other issues, it can damage the oral cells because, just like cigarettes, you're changing the DNA in the oral, call it epithelial cells, but the cells in the mouth. It weakens the immune system too. And, our kids, they share these devices. It's a very social thing to do. At parties, they share them. So they're often getting things from their friends. They're getting sick because they're sharing whatever germs they're getting. And then the actual active vaping does weaken the immune system. So it makes them more susceptible to having a bad, reaction to viruses or COVID, other things like that. We have heard a lot of reports for many years about seizures from nicotine poisoning, seizures from too much nicotine. And COVID really kind of stopped the tracking of all that, but we are still hearing about seizures from nicotine. And there are other issues, but you are 5 times more likely to start smoking cigarettes and doing other drugs if you vape. That is just a statistic that we know. So some of the reasons teens are vaping, and we've mentioned some of these before, but the flavoring, obviously, as I mentioned, most kids who start are starting with flavors, and they love the flavors. They're very enticing. Also, the youth targeted marketing, as you saw, they're really just, they're going right after our kids. They're also cheaper than other products, cheaper than cigarettes. They're really easy to get delivered to the house, which is another thing to be aware of, especially over COVID. But now that kids understand how to do it, we've heard of kids getting deliveries from Uber Eats. They will deliver to your house anything. So it's just really important to see what your kids are getting delivered, but also if they have the apps like Venmo and Zelle, things like that might be coming directly from a credit card or accounts. It's important to see what they're spending on, because it might be a very easy way to pay someone at school or pay a friend or pay someone in the community to get their vape without you knowing, because it's not being charged to a convenience store elsewhere. So it's really important that we're just vigilant about that. Also, the social norms, people feel pressured to vape, but I think it's really important to understand that most kids are still not. Doesn't mean that it's not a serious problem among the people who are, but it's become really normalized in our communities, unfortunately. And again, our kids are facing a mental health crisis in this country. We're hearing a real confluence of mental health and substance use. And our experts say that really there is very often a deep connection between substance use and mental health, that kids are really self-medicating. So we just need to be able to be understanding and provide the right level of support to kids. Also, the head rush. I mean, it's really intense. They get a strong nicotine kick, and kids report really loving that. They're very addictive. They can be extremely addictive very quickly, or it could take longer, but we just don't, it really depends. My nephew actually said, that as soon as he vaped, he knew right away that it was going to be a problem for him, because it was an immediate addiction for him. But other kids, it's not the same. It can take longer. And then perceived lower risk. They hear on wherever, TV, Instagram, that it's, quote, safer than cigarettes. So they hear safe, right? Oops, I keep messing this up, but I want to share with you, we have done some interviews with students. We've done student panels, and this is just someone who was kind enough to share her story, and I just want to share it with you.
I tried to quit was when I was 18, and I've had like good periods of being vape free. I know there was one point where I had gone vape free for like 8 months, and I was doing really good. And then I was hanging out with some friends, and they were vaping, and I smelled it, and it's like an instant, like 360, like maybe I could just do it casually, I mean, there's been some things that have been helpful. Sour candy, or just something that really activates your taste buds. Also staying busy, not being at home where I can convince myself that it's a good idea to go and get one. Financially, where I really wanted to, stop spending $30 a week on a disposable. In some ways that I just feel like hopeless. Like I really wish I wouldn't have started this when I was younger, because it feels like a endless loop.
So, it's so heartbreaking. We hear literally hundreds and thousands of stories from students and parents who are just so frustrated. And so I wanted to share that. I think that it just really, to hear it from the youth is really powerful.
I tried to quit.
So I just want to go forward. And I will share another parent voice with you soon. Very quickly, I love these because this is my life. I mean, if I went into my kid's room when she was 17, I would not have known where to look for these products, but really they can look like anything. And these arrows show weed pens, vape pens. They are devices. So they look like highlighters. They look like things that your kids should be using, but they shouldn't. So it's just really important to know what these look like. And again, just stay vigilant because, and ask the questions of your kids, because these are hiding right under our noses. Some of the signs of vaping. So one of the challenges with the signs of vaping really is that some of the behavior of someone who's addicted to vaping is also the same behavior of just kids being teenagers, moody and ornery and sometimes angry, secretive. So, it's just important to know your child. And if you're finding that their behavior is changing, it might be a sign that something is going on. So it's really about knowing your youth. But basically, some of the key ones are secretive attitude, closing the door, not wanting to be where you are. If you're on a family vacation or at dinner, if they're going to the bathroom a lot, or going outside a lot, it might be a sign that they need to get a hit or a rip of their vape. That's what they call it. So that might be a sign for you. And it was a sign for me that something was wrong. Also, another sign I missed is that, yes, they don't smell like cigarettes, which are awful smelling. But when my child would come home at night, my 17-year-old, and say goodnight, I would always make her give me a kiss goodnight. I smelled a sweet smell, but I didn't identify it because it didn't exist for me at the time. E-cigarettes were not a thing. So there is a sweet smell. It's an aerosol. These are aerosolized products. So aerosols, like hairspray, it will stick to your hair, to your clothes. So just to be aware, if you smell something or you think they're trying to disguise the smell of something with room fresheners or perfumes, etc., might be a sign for you. Also looking out for the devices, obviously, and changes in sleeping habit patterns, because nicotine, frankly, and pot, but nicotine, because it's a stimulant, it may mess with their sleeping patterns and they may have trouble going to sleep. They may be more anxious, more irritable, having outbursts of anger. It could be a sign that your child is addicted, possibly having withdrawal if they're with you for a period of time and they can't get a hit of their nicotine, their vape. It could be a sign that, or if you're trying to take their vape away and they're really angry about it, this could also be a sign that they need help. And then also the nicotine makes kids lose their appetite potentially. So you might see weight loss. It's something called nixic. You might see a change in eating patterns. And also, as I mentioned, looking out for, their Apple Pay, these spending apps that kids have.
It was definitely.
And again, I want to share one more video with you, which is from a parent. And this is really reflective of what we hear out in the field and letters and emails that we get and parents who we talk to.
It was definitely lonely for me too initially, when tried to look for resources, although I live in Columbus, Ohio. No cessation therapy was recognized for any minors. And the schools, like everybody else said, either they were suspending them or punishing them. And yes, when my kids started, I think when I found out it was 2018, and in a couple of years they were all isolated due to COVID. Fast forward next year, it's like this person in my house I don't even recognize. Nicotine made them sneaky, they were impulsive, they were angry, and then they were isolated and depressed, and anxiety was there. Therapy, they wouldn't accept any CBT therapy, they wouldn't take any medication. And then I think, like everybody else, they said they started to self-medicate with marijuana, which eventually I feel like, affected their cognitive behavior, and then made them so laid back. And it's like, I don't recognize this kid who was a good student, an athlete, a soccer player. And now who's this kid in my house? I don't even know this man, like, growing in front of our eyes and away from us.
So this is, a story that we hear over and over, unfortunately. It sounds so innocuous. It's just nicotine. It's just like cigarettes, but it's really not. And unfortunately, when the addiction takes over, it really can change kids' behavior, kids' moods, change their brain entirely, So this is why we're really just trying to make parents aware and sort of sound the alarm, and just so they can have conversations with their kids. So to that end, I just want to spend a little bit of time talking about, how we talk to kids. And, we have, again, been lucky enough to source things from addiction psychiatrists, from parenting experts. So if you found vaping products in your home or on your child, or maybe you haven't yet, but if you're feeling angry and frustrated and maybe even embarrassed, I think all of these feelings are really normal. I know I was extremely angry. My daughter was someone who never would have picked up a cigarette. So I just couldn't understand why this was happening. But basically, based on everything that you've seen today, hopefully you understand that really the most poignant thing to do would be to come from a place of empathy and understanding, and understand that our kids were targeted. As Dr. Avery has said, I love the way he says it. I'm just going to read this, that addiction hides in the shadows because of the shame that comes from doing something you can't control and know deep down it isn't healthy. And I just love the way he frames that. So when deciding to talk to your child or your youth about vaping, it's really important to have a conversation, to prep for it, just have a general understanding of the issue, which you do. And as a trusted adult, it's really important to come from a place of no judgment, because I think when we start to judge, they pull back and they get defensive and just shut down, which is, I'm not. And by the way, this advice I wish I had 4 or 5 years ago when I was doing this, because, my initial response was fear, I was angry because I was afraid. And I think it's really important to know it's okay to share with your child that you're scared. But it's also important, maybe, just also not to judge. And maybe just asking the questions and keeping open questions like, are you feeling anxious or depressed? Or why do you think you're vaping? Are you getting pressure from school? Tell me more about it. Are kids vaping? What's happening in the bathrooms? That's a very common place. People don't even feel safe going in the bathrooms now because kids are vaping. And they either don't want to be tempted by it, or they just don't want to be near it at all if they're not vaping. And we work with the parenting expert, Julie Ross, who, is really incredible. She also has an Ask the Expert on our webinar collection. If you want to go look at her webinar as well, you can get the recording of that. But it's just, basically she suggests talking way before adolescence, because they have to get it in their brains before they reach the stage of exposure, and before they are tempted to use, and also before they feel invincible, which is sort of that, early high school to high school age, they start feeling like nothing could harm them, right? So keeping lines of communication open, avoiding sarcasm and judgment, and also don't ask questions you know the answer to. So, if you find a vape in their room, don't say, do you have vapes in your room, or are you vaping? Well, if you find vapes in their room, call them out and say, look, I found this in your room. Can you share with me what's going on? And be ready to have a conversation. And of course, if you suspect that there's an underlying mental health issue or an addiction, That's really important to speak to an expert and seek professional help. So this is all just some of the same things. And really also go easy on yourself. I mean, it's really easy to blame ourselves and say, what did I do wrong? Where did I go wrong? But our kids were targeted by an industry. It really is not our fault. All we can do is help our kids know that we love them, that we are there to support them, and we will do anything we can to help them quit. So we need to make a plan with our kids, and we'll talk a little bit about cessation. So supporting our teens to quit, there is support, as the parent mentioned in the video. Unfortunately, there is no FDA approved cessation therapy for youth. Patches, gums, no drugs are approved. However, if you talk to a pediatrician, talk to a doctor, they will very often be able to prescribe some of this off script based on their weight and their age and all of that. They are willing to do it, and it's frankly, it can be very effective for some people. Some people may not need it. They may just need to talk to someone. There are quitting apps like the Truth Initiative's This Is Quitting, which is an evidence-based quitting program. There's actually one for parents as well. When my daughter was quitting, I used the app as well, and it just gives you support. It's AI driven, artificial intelligence, but it really gives you additional support. So it's just it's a great resource to have. And also understand that that relapsing is very normal. Unfortunately, it can take many attempts to quit, so it can be really frustrating to quit. Bonnie Halpern-Felsher is one of our experts out of Stanford University, and she had a couple of pieces of advice: setting a quit date, throwing away everything related to vaping, spending time in places where you can't use products, you can't vape, and getting help if you need to quit. Not everyone can do it alone, and know that withdrawal is really normal and relapse is normal. So all of these things are really helpful. Also, the parent that was on the video mentioned school policy. I'm not going to go into this in detail, but unfortunately, many schools are using a punitive approach, which is really hard on our kids and actually can make addiction worse, can separate them from their communities where they really can get help, and isolated at home where they may not have parents at home, may be more likely to use substances at home. So we just need to be able to support our schools in coming up with the right programs. And there are great programs for schools. If you want to know more, Alliance for Healthier Generation has great ones. I'm going to share a video with you that from Alliance for Healthier Generation, which I think is fantastic. And I really do encourage you to talk to your schools about their policy. And many of them are very punitive. So here we go.
I think for Healthier Generation in general, where we sit, and this makes us unique in the kind of public health nonprofit space, is we try to sit really squarely in that intersection between health and learning. And so what is it to promote good health so that, right, kids are there, present at school, able to learn, able to thrive, and get what they need to then move on and be, whether it's college and career ready, right, successful adults, whatever that looks like to them, right, contributing members to their communities in ways that feel really meaningful and impactful. And so this, to me, our tobacco policy, to me, is the kind of manifestation of that intersection, right? Like, we want kids to be healthy, we want kids to engage in health promoting behaviors, and they can't learn if they're not in school. And so if the intersection of I'm engaging in a behavior that is not health promoting, right, and then the response is we're going to send you away, then we've totally missed that mark.
So again, I think we can do better. Our schools can do better, and some are really working on it. And there are programs for schools that can be helpful. So parents need to advocate for their youth, especially youth who have been suspended or punished. So I just want to quickly mention a few things, programs that we have that might be helpful to you in your communities. This is one which is an advocacy and enforcement program. As I mentioned, These products are everywhere. We're frustrated as parents to walk into these stores, see kids buying these products, see how available they are. Parents opposing illegal sales of nicotine or poison is in response to really inadequate enforcement of the vaping laws that are supposed to restrict all these products, get them off the market. So this just empowers parents and others in the community to go into stores, report these stores, and sometimes it leads to inspections, violations, fines, and sometimes even store closures. So we just wanted to share that with you. It is being implemented in a number of cities across the country. Also, we have an educator toolkit. So if you want to go out and do this in your community, whether you're a parent, a school nurse, a principal, a public health advocate, run a nonprofit, we can very quickly and easily share all of our resources with you, including this presentation. And so you can go out and do this in your communities. That's the goal. Also, while we really do talk to parents, that's our main target audience is adults. We were asked by parents, they said, look, our kid doesn't care about the health harms. We need some way to get to our kids that resonates with them. And we know that the environment and environmental harms and impact resonates with our kids. So we came up with a campaign. As I mentioned very briefly earlier, these products, even the disposable ones, are actually not disposable. The industry has left it to the consumer to figure out how to deal with it, but they have left a huge mess. Every second, 5 vapes are thrown away in our country. 5 every second. There are millions of vapes that sanitation departments don't know what to do with, kids don't know what to do with, and we don't want kids vaping. But we feel like if we can turn them into advocates for the environment instead of users, that's a way to get to them. And this campaign really resonates with youth. It is basically a social media campaign designed to target youth on the environmental harms and really the social justice harms as well. And we've gotten a lot of good traction with this campaign. We have shared it with schools. Schools can use our posters. So we have been able to share this more widely. We have done tabling events at Earth Day and things like that. Kids can get involved in this. So again, we want them as advocates. And that is it. We just, if you don't mind, before you go, to take a quick survey, just a quick post survey so that we know if this was helpful. I know there's a lot of information here. I'm going to share how you can get in touch with us. Most importantly, I am doing this as a volunteer. I'm a full-time volunteer as founding partner, but we really do rely on donations to help us run our organization. So if you could donate, we would love it. We would be very grateful. If you want to get involved in your community, reach out to us. I'll show you how in a moment. But there are easy ways to reach out. And then, and if you have any questions, I'm going to just look in this Q&A. I know we had a lot of people. How should community partners that work with families support youth where adults are vaping in their homes? So that is tricky. We do know, as you probably do, that adults who vape and smoke in their homes are more likely to have youth who do the same. I think it's just really important to understand that, our parents don't always make the best decisions. And and it doesn't mean that you have to follow, but I think sharing the health harms with both parents and the kids is very helpful. And also just sharing, I think parents can also have an open conversation and say, look, I got targeted and I became addicted and I want better for you. And so maybe even be willing to go down the journey with them and try to quit. With this campaign, do you recommend a place to dispose of these products? That is an issue we have. It is a huge issue, and unfortunately there is no good answer. These products contain toxic chemicals, lithium-ion batteries. Literally departments of sanitation are having trouble dealing with it as well. It's really trying to make the industry responsible and accountable for dealing with it. Maybe having a program where you can send them back to the companies and they deal with it, because it's not fair to have to rely on individuals to do this. They should be taking responsibility. So I think that's it. I want to share, first of all, our QR code if you want to get involved, but you will also get an email with the recording. And if you want to reach us, this is the way to reach us online. And we really are grateful for your participation. We hope that this information is helpful to you. We'd love to get more, more advice if you want, or more information that you want us to share that we're not sharing. So I just want to say thank you very much, and we look forward to hearing from you guys. And I appreciate you participating today. I think we're going to stop sharing my screen. All right. Thank you all very much for joining us today.